Unfortunately, it is almost a necessity to put a disclaimer on videos like these. We here at Off The Play are not here to advocate violence on the football field, blah blah blah. But let's face it, when a big brawl breaks out on the field, not many of us continue watching where the ball is going, do we? We will not go through all the infamous local brawls that are floating around, there are just too many for one video. We will instead look at some of the biggest stoushes at the elite level. I'm Jackson from Off The Play, and here are some of the most infamous VFL, AFL brawls in history. Let's go back almost 80 years and start with the 1945 Grand Final between Carlton and South Melbourne. The game is remembered for a number of violent incidents, out of which 7 players were suspended. It has continued to be remembered as one of the roughest games in the league's history, giving rise to its nickname, the Bloodbath. In all, 9 players were reported on 14 charges during the game. Bottles were also thrown onto the ground by spectators. South Melbourne's Ted Whitfield copped the most severe of the penalties, receiving total suspensions that resulted in him sitting out of football for over a year. His rap sheet was pretty damning. He used abusive language towards and attempted to strike a goal umpire, then, and admittedly this is kind of funny, he ran down the field and lifted his Guernsey to try and avoid being reported. Well, that didn't work. He didn't even end up going to the tribunal to defend himself, and a couple of weeks later, he was sacked by South Melbourne. For those who are wondering, Carlton won the game by 28 points. The Bloodbath game kinda set a precedent, and since then we have seen a number of big brawls transpire on Grand Final day. The 1985 Grand Final brawl between Essendon and Hawthorn was a big one, as we can see here. And so was the quarter-time stoush between Bombers and Collingwood in 1990. There were also some big all-in brawls during a series of under-19 Grand Finals between North Melbourne and Richmond during the 80s. And over in South Australia, it was much of the same with the 1991 Grand Final between West Adelaide and North Adelaide. This match would become known as the Bloodbath because, well, originality was clearly not their strong point. Not that it didn't deserve the title. It was a fiery contest before North's Steve Sims decided to turn things up about 100 levels by knocking out an opponent, and as we can see, the rest is history. The 1974 Battle of Windy Hill between Essendon and Richmond was another big one. Mal Brown, isn't that a familiar name, was playing for Richmond at the time, and he was in the thick of things yet again. Apparently he laid out one of Essendon's trainers at the halftime break, and madness would soon follow as Essendon's 19th man ran onto the ground to go after Brown. Eventually, an all-in brawl started, which involved both teams, many off-field personnel, cans being thrown by the crowd, and mounted police enter the field. A police horse even stood on Mal Brown. The game between Hawthorn and Geelong from 1985 will long be remembered. It was a day that spilled from action on the field to action off it and into the courts. Behind the play, Lee Matthews viciously struck Neville Bruns in the face as the game wound down. In Matthews' final year, it remains the biggest blight on his career. Bruns suffered a compound fracture to his jaw and said he thought he had been shot. His jaw needed to be wired and he missed an extended period of football. Matthews would later say, "It was an ugly game, and when the game turned ugly, I turned the ugliest." Matthews also had to be helped from the field as Geelong teammate Stephen Hocking made sure that his deed did not go unpunished. Matthews was deregistered by the AFL for 4 weeks and was later charged with assault. Apparently on the night of the hearing, they entered the same elevator at AFL House. Getting into a lift with a stranger can be kind of awkward at the best of times, so this would have been almost comical. In the years that have followed, Matthews has expressed regret over the incident, but according to an article in 2018, he had yet to speak to Bruns. The 1987 Battle of Britain between North Melbourne and Carlton was a weird one. The two clubs were in London playing an exhibition game at the Oval, and it resulted in 16 charges, with 6 of the 7 players reported eventually suspended. Most famously was the incident involving a 19-year-old Alistair Clarkson and Carlton's Ian Aitken. Clarkson, at the time Australia's spokesperson for Little Man Syndrome, mistook Aitken's face for a coach's box wall and left the Blues player with a broken jaw. Aitken later said, "It was a pretty low act. Hitting someone from behind is as low as you can get. I'm sure he regrets it, but I'm not interested in any apology. I don't know him as a person, and I don't care to know him." The two teams were staying in the same hotel, and would you believe it, apparently Clarkson and Aitken, swollen jaw and everything, got into the same elevator. Two awkward elevator stories in the one video. Apparently this too was a quiet ride. West Coast and Footscray had a huge brawl in 1994 when Doggies player Danny Southern showed off his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu expertise by choking out Peter Sumich. Southern copped a $10,000 fine, with Sumich later saying that he thought he was going to die in the incident. He was not happy about Southern's treatment for many years after, but the pair finally buried the hatchet in 2018. Also in the West, you had the Demolition Derby of the year 2000, which featured a number of left-right goodnights by Fremantle's Dale Kickett. It was a very fiery game that afternoon, with a lot happening off the ball too. Kickett ended up with a 9-week suspension for his role in the brawl. The following year, another Bulldogs cult figure in Tony Liberatore went up to Richmond's Matthew Knights and said, "Here you go, how about a knuckle sandwich?" which unsurprisingly created a very spiteful contest between the two teams that afternoon. Speaking again of the Western Bulldogs, the brawl against St Kilda was an underrated one back in 2003. These two clubs went at it for a little while, with Ryan Hargrave decking Heath Black in front of his coach. And the last match of this feature is the line in the sand game between Essendon and Hawthorn. You know you have to give extra points to the brawls that get their own name and their own Wikipedia pages. That's when you know they're good. Dermot Brereton has always had some mystery involvement in this brawl, but according to Mr. Five-Time Day, Five-Time Night Premiership winner, all he said was a passing comment to current skipper Richie Vandenberg, which was, "Don't put up with it, you're a leader of this club." And Big Bad Richie Rich certainly took this to heart and began to fly the flag as the skipper of the Hawks. The brawl ruined the dinner plans of the Murphy and Beaumont families, who were allegedly supposed to go to dinner together that night. And in total, 18 players were reported on a record 26 charges, with over $70,000 in fines given out. And there you go, that's our list. Please let us know in the comments what brawls I missed out on, and do not forget to like the video and subscribe to Off the Plate. Thanks for watching.